The company that was once the most valuable, powerful, and prominent in the world can't get the most important thing right. That's giving AI to its users. And it's gotten so bad now that we are seeing new and official reporting that Apple, the company that just can't get Apple intelligence right, is actually enlisting the help of their chief competitor, Google, to get it done. So, on today's show, gonna kind of bring a hot take Tuesday on a Thursday, maybe. We're going to talk about the new breaking news story that Apple is reportedly and officially going to team up with Google to stay AI relevant. I'm excited to dive into this one. I hope you are too. If you're new here, welcome. What's going on, y'all? My name is Jordan Wilson, and this is Everyday AI. This is your daily live stream podcast and free daily newsletter helping everyday business leaders like you and me not just keep up with what's happening in the world of AI, but how we can make sense of it and use all this information to make the right decisions to grow our companies and our careers. If that's what you're trying to do, it starts here with the unedited, unscripted, realist thing in artificial intelligence, this live stream podcast. But if you want to take it to the next level, make sure to go to youreverydayai.com. There, you got to go sign up for the free daily newsletter. We're going to be recapping the highlights from today's show, as well as keeping you up to date with everything else that's happening in the world of AI. No BS, just what you need. So make sure you go check out our daily newsletter. All right. Apple, catastrophic failure. I mean, there's definitely going to be books and movies written about how Apple's fall from prominence probably started with its absolute fumbling of the AI bag. They had the resources, they had the people, they had the plan, they couldn't execute. And they failed at a scale I think we probably haven't seen in decades. So, on today's show, we're going to detail the new breaking Bloomberg report that unveils how Apple needed help from its chief rival, Google, to not fail at AI or maybe just fail a little less. We're going to uncover Apple's recent AI failures that led them to this point, and we're going to project how this could change the competitive AI landscape in big tech. All right, live stream audience, what's going on? Miguel joining us from Chile. Yeah. If you are listening on the podcast, you can always join us live, 7:30 a.m. Central Standard Time on the LinkedIn, the YouTube, all those different things. Marie holding it down for New Jersey. Robert joining in from Raleigh. Two people from Chile, Jose joining us as well. Thanks to Brian and everyone else. If you have any questions like Michelle does here, make sure to get them in. Maybe I'll crack them at the end. But pretty big story. And I'll just give you my take. It's not Tuesday, but we had the holiday this week. So I might just have enough coffee in me to deliver a little bit of a hot take Tuesday on a Thursday. But here's what I think. This is pretty big, right? It might just seem like one of those, dorky AI and tech news subheadings, but this is monumental for a couple of reasons. We're talking about more than 2 billion Apple devices out there in the wild in the world. So this is going to affect potentially more than a billion people in bringing the next generation of artificial intelligence to those 2.2 billion devices. But let's talk about trillions. That's the tech trillionaire companies, two of them teaming up. You can make the argument that there hasn't been two more important companies over the last decade than Google and Apple. I mean, you got to throw Microsoft in there as well. But I mean, Google and Apple, they fight on the hardware side, on the software side. They are two of the biggest rivals in the world, right? I'm thinking of rivalries that I enjoy or kind of take a part of as a fan, right? I'm a huge North Carolina basketball fan, right? Their chief rival is Duke. This is like North Carolina being like, let's hire Duke's team to teach us how to play basketball, even though we have to compete against them. Do you see how asinine this is and how actually monumental it is for one of, and what was once the most powerful and prominent company in the world by market cap, no longer, having to enlist the help and pay their biggest rival to deliver a now what's in generative AI and large language models, a fundamental feature. So Apple is years behind. And I think that they're going to continue to lose their global footing. I've talked about this on previous shows. Apple, previously, when you're looking at companies in terms of market cap, they were the biggest and most powerful in the world, and it wasn't even close, right? Second and third place weren't even on the pedestal with them. Apple was light years ahead. Now Apple is barely hanging on to the third biggest company. And I've said this before on previous shows. I think whether it's 2 years or four, I think eventually Apple is going to fall out of the top five companies in terms of market cap. I know when I initially said this, I don't know, maybe a half year ago when Apple was still number one in the world, people are like, no, Jordan, you're crazy. And clearly they've already dropped to number three. So it's going to continue to happen. But I think this partnership, even though it does help Apple a little bit, I think it raises their floor, but it raises Google's ceiling. My gosh, I was kind of shocked yesterday to see that Google's stock shot up 9%. Apple's went up 3%. So I do think that this helps Apple's floor a little bit, but this pushes Google's ceiling, and there's a big difference, right? Especially when you think of having to shake the hand of one of your competitors, knowing that you're probably only going to get incremental gains or stop the bleeding, but it's going to help explode one of your biggest competitors. So let's talk about what started this. This was a Bloomberg report that just came out, and you got to note the headline, and we're going to dissect this one a little later. It says Apple plans AI-powered web search tool for Siri to rival OpenAI and Perplexity. Okay, so again, this is not official, but Bloomberg by far for at least a decade has been the go-to source on being correct and authoritative in terms of Apple news. So this one I'll chalk up to, yeah, it's pretty much a done deal. But right now it's just reports, but let's detail what is happening. So the Bloomberg report said that Apple and Google signed a formal agreement to test Gemini AI in Apple's environment. This is obviously a huge, significant step and a historic partnership that marks Apple's continued AI failures. And also, there were other players in the fold, including OpenAI and Anthropic. And reportedly, Anthropic was just saying they wanted too much money. Apparently, $1.5 billion a year that would increase annually to essentially be Apple's preferred AI partner. So, Apple's first new version of Siri was really bad. And it reportedly forced a ground up rebuild of the technology, right? Technically, Siri was one of the first pieces of artificial intelligence that billions of people in the world used, right? It's been around for more than a decade. It is more traditional machine learning, artificial intelligence, but let's be honest, it's dumb, right? And I don't feel bad saying that, even though I've, had private conversations with people who worked on the original Siri team. I don't hesitate to say Siri is dumb. Alexa is dumb, right? If you talk to these quote unquote smart assistants that were smart 10 years ago, it's extremely painful because if you use ChatGPT's advanced voice mode, if you use Google's Gemini Live, those are extremely helpful, right? And neural and sound like talking to a real person, and they're smart. Siri, Alexa, not. But Apple has also lost so much AI talent. And we're going to unravel a little bit more why it's gotten to this point. But they've essentially lost some of their biggest names in AI, some of their top engineers leading their AI teams to Meta. And the new kind of buzzword here out of this report is Apple's World Knowledge Answers. And that is what they're hoping or positioning to challenge ChatGPT directly. So this Google Gemini partnership with Apple, kind of the service offering or the feature that is going to arise from this, it's not just replacing Siri, but it's working on a new feature or a new facet of Siri called World Knowledge Answer. And this partnership obviously could eventually be rolled out to billions of devices. And this prevents Apple from becoming a dumb pipe in the AI revolution era. So let's talk a little bit more specifically on what this will look like. Again, this is according to the Bloomberg reports. So, this world knowledge answers. What the heck is that? What does it mean? How will it be used? How is Google's Gemini integrated into all of this? Okay, so Apple is essentially developing an AI-powered web search tool that they're calling World Knowledge Answers. Hopefully, that's not what it's actually called when it is debuted. But Bloomberg says that this is going to function as more of an answers engine, right? So, kind of the category technically popularized by Perplexity. But now we've seen this roll out to ChatGPT, Google Gemini, etc. Right? This is these large language models that essentially quickly and usually accurately query multiple internet sources to provide an up to date answer. Okay, so that is essentially what we're talking about here with Apple's new partnership with Google Gemini in their world knowledge answers. And this new system is designed to provide AI generated summaries from web search results instantly. So if you've used either Google's AI overviews or Google's AI mode, it's kind of like that. By the way, if you're using that, use Google's AI mode. Google's AI overviews, sorry. I know Google is a partner of this podcast. Google's AI overviews, not super reliable. Their Google AI mode, insanely useful. So fast, so accurate. It's probably, if I look at my quarterly use of tools and their, plus or minus percentage, Google's AI mode is probably the AI tool I'm using more and more than anything else, at least compared to quarter over quarter. And I think that Apple realizes that, right? Apple says, hey, we see obviously with Google being the default search engine in Apple, which Google reportedly pays more than $20 billion a year. So it looks like Apple may be now giving some of those billions of dollars back. I think they realize, hey, this concept of using a capable large language model to quickly deliver queries from the web and give them to users is going to be extremely helpful. And that's essentially what we may be getting with this new kind of partnership feature in World Knowledge Answers. So, how's this going to work, right? I mean, you're not going to talk to Siri and it's going to be like, yo, hold up, let me go use Google Gemini and go to google.com and go to AI mode for you. So there's some technical aspects going on under the hood. So Bloomberg confirmed that Google's Gemini AI will specifically handle web summarization features for Apple. And it is a special version of Google Gemini that Google is reportedly making just for this partnership. So their new Apple's new Siri, which they promise is really getting smarter this time, essentially it's broken down into three core systems. There's an intelligent planner, a search system, and a web summarizer. Okay, so that is technically how it works. And Google, like I said, has already started training a custom AI model designed to run on Apple's server. And that's the big clincher here because Apple, to their credit, right? I know I drag Apple through the mud, and Grok. It's kind of easy to. Um, but one thing you have to tip your cap to is Apple takes privacy a little more seriously than other AI companies with their kind of private cloud architecture. And that is how this will eventually come together. So essentially, Google is creating a Apple specific version of their Gemini model that will reportedly run on Apple's private cloud compute. So right now, and this is according to Bloomberg, all Google AI processing will run on that private cloud compute. So it's not like Siri's just going to kick it to google.com in the background. So this is to ensure, Apple's kind of data protection that they normally offer on the rest of their device. Also, Apple does have their own foundational models, which are not very good. Let's be honest, to handle the private user data. Okay. So essentially, because of the way that this new system works, and it has these three different pieces. So if anything is asking about your personal data, reportedly, the new world what is it? World Knowledge Answers. See, I'm already forgetting it. World Knowledge Answers. That's just such a weird name. Anyways, so if you're asking something of this new, smarter system and it's about your own personal data, reportedly it will use Apple's foundational models. But if you're asking for something outside of your own personal data, then that's where it will tap into this custom and private instance of Google Gemini to deliver that essentially answers engine for your query. So it will be interesting to see how this happens if you're asking for both, right? What if I'm asking for something along the lines of, hey, my wife texted me about this product. I want to see the latest product reviews and if this is a growing, industry or something like that. I don't know how it's going to handle it. If it's going to use both of these models, because if so, it's probably going to be a little slow, and the likelihood for error is higher. But luckily, that's why the engineers get paid the MBA dollars and not myself. So a little bit more about this private cloud compute. That's Apple's PCC security architecture that was unveiled back in June, around the time of their WWDC when Apple initially announced Apple Intelligence, right? Because they essentially said, we're creating this whole new type of private cloud because, that was one of the reasons that Apple dragged their feet on, implementing generative AI and large language models into the iPhone and their other devices is because they said they needed a more secure or a new type of cloud. All right. And this is what according to reports, they are saying will prevent Google from accessing personal user information directly. Because I know that this is going to be a hot point of contention. For me, I don't care. I'll give all my data to Google, to OpenAI, to Apple. Don't care for me, but I know I'm in the minority there. A lot of people are privacy and data watchdogs. So that's kind of how that will work because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interest in how that works, right? Google being the company that has monetized over the past couple of decades from data, right? Data that you obviously adhere to giving them when you use their services versus Apple, the company that has traditionally kept all data tightly under wraps. So it's an interesting juxtaposition in how that's ultimately going to play out. Um, so let's talk a little bit more about this world knowledge answers, what it's going to mean initially, and then how it may expand. So Bloomberg says that first, this world knowledge answers is going to start with Siri, right? So any query that you would ask Siri would tap into if it's outside of your personal or private data, in which case it would be handled by Apple's foundational models. If not, then it would tap into this world knowledge answers, which is the Google Gemini partnership. But later, Apple is reportedly going to want to expand this into Safari, which that would be great. And then also their Spotlight search functionality. This will support text, photos, videos, and local points of interest in a unified interface. That part is interesting, right? Obviously, being able to talk to Siri and say, "Hey, based on my preferences, what are the best restaurants around me if you're in a new place," something like that. If we could finally get any AI system to do that accurately, I think that's when we usher in this new era for those that are fine with the privacy implications of generative AI actually being useful in your daily life. Marie says, sounds very complicated. Yeah, I will say this. A lot of times when we use AI, right, especially in a chatbot, it seems so simple. It's actually, especially this type of partnership, it is kind of convoluted for sure. All right. So why did this happen, right? How did we get from Apple, one of the first technically players in artificial intelligence? Apple, pre ChatGPT, had one of the deepest rosters in the world when it came to machine learning. So, how did we get here? How did almost seemingly every single Apple competitor figure out generative AI and large language models, but Apple didn't? And it got so bad that Apple not only had to partner up and pay their chief competitor, but they're facing multiple lawsuits on just how much they overpromised their AI and underdelivered. Well, the reason we got here is Apple's in trouble. Yeah, I'm not the only one to think that Apple is on a irreversible slide downward in terms of valuation. Yes, Apple, recently CEO Tim Cook essentially said, "Hey, we're going to go all in on AI," right? Which is funny. They should have been saying this back in 2018, 2019, not in the year 2025. Saying, "Oh, we're going to spend all this money and do all these acquisitions." It's, if I'm being honest, in that aspect, either investing from scratch or acquiring companies is too little too late. The only way that Apple can even begin to right the ship is exactly what they're doing here. Because I've been saying this on the show until I've been red in the face. There's only two players right now in the frontier AI model game. That's OpenAI and Google. Sorry, Anthropic. Sorry, Meta. Sorry, Microsoft, right? Microsoft obviously uses OpenAI's models to power their Copilot, but their own models, not there yet, but I'm interested to see if they can catch up. But there's there's no one near OpenAI and Google. That's why for their previous quote unquote smarter Siri that fell through the cracks and they had to disable a lot of the functionality because of these lawsuits, right? We saw that they were getting, the summaries, right? When Siri would summarize your text messages or emails or news stories, they were getting it, uh, I'd say hilariously wrong, but a lot of times it was bad and ugly, and they were facing lawsuits because of that. So Apple had to partner with OpenAI previously, and in this one, they could have partnered with OpenAI or even Claude, but they went with Anthropic, but they went with Google. Uh, so how did this happen? Well, it started Apple at their WWDC, their Worldwide Developer Conference last year, unveiled Apple Intelligence, which at that point I knew it was destined to fail. Right? Anytime you try to hijack AI, how very Apple of Apple, right? The arrogance to come in and say, yeah, we're just going to rebrand artificial intelligence Apple Intelligence. I roasted them at the time and will continue to roast them for all eternity as long as I'm sitting here doing this show. So they unveiled at their WWDC about 15 months ago their Apple Intelligence and how they were going to bring this newer, smarter AI to Siri. Then the lawsuits came because nearly a year later, right? And they obviously tied it to sales, right? They're like, okay, well, you got to have the newest iPhone to take advantage of it. So go buy that iPhone. And then it didn't work. It didn't come out, right? So they're facing multiple lawsuits. So one was Landschaft versus Apple that alleged Siri hallucinated. AI features. That was funny. Sorry, they said like Apple hallucinated when they were talking about what Siri could actually do. Yeah, you saw all these even commercials that came out showing Siri doing these things that it definitely couldn't do. Yeah, I remember sitting with my wife once and like an Apple commercial came on, and this was recently showing something in Siri, and she's like, "Siri can do that," and I'm like, "No, it definitely can't." I'm like, that's going to be a lawsuit. Yeah, lawsuit. Another lawsuit, Acardi versus Apple cited delayed AI features and false advertising claims. That one was in May of 2025, where the Landschaft lawsuit was in March 2025. All right. Then, right around that time, Apple announced some major Siri and AI delays, essentially kicking the can. And they're like, whoops, we know we promised all this stuff, but it might not come out until 2026 or later. Then there was another lawsuit about 2 months ago in June 2025, Tucker versus Apple, where it accused Apple executives of misleading investors about their actual AI progress. Because, yeah, everyone investing in Apple, they're hearing all these things, they're seeing all these promises. It's going to come out, it's going to come out, and nothing comes out. And their AI stinks. Apple Intelligence is now the butt of a joke. And executives at this point had reportedly already sold nearly $100 million in stock during this tumultuous period. right? So reportedly, the insiders over there working at Apple are like, oh, yeah, we're screwed. We better sell off some of our stock before it starts to hit the tank, right? Also, I mean, luckily, Apple's hardware, I think, has saved its stock from dropping too much, but it is year to date down, right? Down 2%, which you might not be like, oh, well, what's the big deal? Down 2%, year to date. Well, okay. Well, when you look at Google, Google is up 21% year to date. Okay. Microsoft is up 20% year to date. So essentially, their biggest competitors are all up 15 to 30%. And here Apple is dropped 2%. So people aren't happy, right? Investors aren't happy. Their biggest shareholders, people sitting in the boardroom, they're not happy. No one's happy with Apple in their AI fallout. And if I'm being honest, I am surprised that Tim Cook is still leading Apple after all this. Because, like I said, Apple had the talent. And I'm going to go over a little bit on this talent exodus. So it's obviously hit them very hard in the last couple of months, losing some of their most important AI team members to Meta and OpenAI and Google. But they had the talent going all the way back to 2018. They had some of the best and brightest AI researchers. But now it seems like Apple is not wanting to play the game, because the game right now, if you want the most capable AI engineers and researchers that are going to help your company grow and compete, you got to pay NBA salaries. And Apple, their arrogance, all right, Apple, hey, this is Apple intelligence. They're not playing that game. They're not giving, these researchers and engineers what the market is demanding because they're Apple, right? Well, let's see how that turns out for you. You know what that got you, Apple? Now you got to beg your competitors for help because of your arrogance and saying you're too big to play the game. So let's talk a little bit more about this. So, like I said, Siri's actual architecture reportedly was failing. So, according to reports, they quote unquote just couldn't get it to work properly. All right, according to internal sources. So, their engineering teams, which are being depleted by the week, required a complete rebuild using advanced large language model technology from the ground up. That's how bad their revamped AI Siri rollout was. That just didn't work. And their enhanced Siri launch timeline, that was supposed to come out in 2024. Now it's like, okay, we're hearing March 2026, but only because of this Google partnership. So I'm sure that Google was aware how deep that Apple was into it. And I'm sure we'll find out more of these details in terms of the financials later. But I'm guessing Google cashed in hard on Apple's arrogance and the fact that they were, let's be honest, screwed, right? Transparently, I'm doing this live stream on my Mac computer. My phone, my camera that I'm using is my iPhone, right? I've never so actively, right, after being an iPhone user and a Mac user for, I guess I've been using a Mac for 20 years. I've been using an iPhone for, I don't know, 10. I've never so desperately wanted to get off the Apple, to get off the Mac. It's just hard, right? It's hard because the stuff just works, but the stuff is just dumb now, right? The iPhone's dumb. My Mac is dumb, right? As someone that uses AI daily, and I'm seeing this new hardware from Microsoft, their new hardware that they're rolling out in their PCs. I'm seeing the new Google smartphones, and it's just they're smart now, right? The AI just works. It doesn't work anymore, and it is. I think the rest of the business world hasn't caught up yet, but I'm telling you in 2 to 5 years, when Apple is no longer a top five company in the world, which you would have asked people 5 years ago, everyone would have said that'll never happen. Apple will be here in 10, 20 years. They're not. One of the reason is the people. So they couldn't get it right. So reportedly, and this was according to some initial reporting from the Information and Bloomberg, back 2 years ago, September 2023, they were reportedly spending millions of dollars per day training generative AI models. And a lot of the reporting at the time, quoting anonymous sources, said that Apple's internal models are going to be better than ChatGPT. No, they aren't. They're not even making it to production because they're so bad. All right. And then in July of this year, that's really when the exodus started to happen. And this is why it is, I think, going to be really, really bad for Apple in the very near future. So their Apple Foundation models lead. So the person literally leading their internal model development reportedly took a $200 million compensation package from Meta. So that's Ruming Peng, who took that deal. And then Apple, there's been 5 separate waves of multiple key AI researchers and engineers, 5 different waves of them leaving to Meta, OpenAI, DeepMind, and Anthropic in the last 2 months. So most reports say it's more than a dozen key people on Apple's AI team. Guess what? They obviously know the ship is on fire. There's a fire internally, and they don't want to be around when that thing sinks. And this is the latest sign on the exterior of the ship that says, yeah, we're sinking because we can't get the basics right. So we got to team up with Google. It almost wasn't Google, though, right? So the Bloomberg report did say that Anthropic was in the discussion, but their demands were a little too much, at least according to what they were offering. But Apple was also reportedly looking at a Perplexity acquisition, but instead chose to partner with Google just for faster deployment. All right, which tells you if their preference might have originally been acquiring Perplexity, but then someone, thankfully, said, yeah, maybe we're not equipped to even acquire a company ourselves and put it into production. Maybe we just need to team up and pay someone that's just already doing it and have them do the work for us. So again, we're talking about billions of devices. And Apple's, right? You also have to think of what this means for them being overly dependent on one of their biggest competitors. Google is in such a power position now because my guess is because Google, I think, has been the most impressive company in the world dating back to, I'll say, December 2024. Google is on fire. And I think this is actually going to be Apple's redeeming AI moment, but it's coming on the back of Google. So Google is in a huge power position here because I don't see, even if Apple were to acquire Perplexity and eventually roll this out in lieu of the Google partnership, I don't think they have the talent to do it. So I personally don't see this partnership going away anytime soon. So this is really good for Google and really bad for Apple because the only way Apple can avoid being the dumb pipe in the room is by leaning on their smart competitor. So is it going to happen? What's this going to look like? When is my Siri going to be able to do anything? I mean, sometimes I ask it for the weather. It doesn't even tell me the weather. I ask for the time and it's like, I can't do that, right? Some of the most simplest things. So reportedly, March 2026, we can all throw a big party, Apple users. That's when this World Knowledge Answers is expected to launch publicly. This partnership with Google, that's when the initial phases will launch, but then the The instances of the world knowledge answers going to Safari and Spotlight will reportedly happen at a later date. And also, there's some other obviously software updates that are coming, built-in health features, all these things. But I think the big software update people are looking at in March 2026 is just for the smarter Siri. That's if it happens, right? So we'll have to see if there's going to be any federal probes on anything anti competitive happening here. Also, we have to look at how this will impact others, specifically OpenAI, Microsoft, and Meta, right? The other big players in the room. Obviously, right now, Apple has a current partnership with OpenAI. They're currently, trying to power some of the queries for Siri. So essentially, how it works now, if you ask Siri a question, so if you have this enabled in your settings, essentially it will pass certain queries off to ChatGPT as a third party provider. This is not how the new world knowledge answers will work. It will happen under Apple's hood, whereas how they have it set up, the Siri and OpenAI partnership right now is for the majority of things that Siri can't answer. It essentially says, would you like to do this in ChatGPT instead? And at that point, it's kind of passing the problem off to a smarter model. But we do have to talk about how big this is going to be in the landscape because OpenAI currently has that partnership with Apple and they currently have a partnership with Microsoft. Although we see that Microsoft is trying to venture out with other providers as well as working on their own models. So I would expect OpenAI to have to come up with a trick up its sleeve in terms of being able to still compete with Google. All right. This is obviously a huge boon for Google. It gives them more money. It gives them more prowess. It gives them more devices that they're ultimately working with. So you also have to look at how the other big three might respond to this big partnership news. All right. Yeah. Accidental hot take Tuesday, Cecilia. I agree. It just happened, right? All right. So I hope this episode was helpful, but here's in a nutshell what's happening. Apple couldn't get it right. They have failed catastrophically over the years, even though they had all the pieces in place, reportedly spending millions of dollars. They've let essentially their best and brightest AI talent go away to their competitors, and now they're forced to pay their competitor in Google to make it work. So we'll see. But at least according to this breaking Bloomberg report, March 2026, we may finally get a smarter Siri in world knowledge answers. This specific version of Google Gemini that is going to specifically run this new feature for Apple's AI. And hey, Apple, maybe we can stop calling it Apple Intelligence now, since it's technically Gemini Intelligence. So I don't know. Have we achieved AGI now? Apple Gemini Intelligence. All right. I hope this was helpful. If so, tell someone about it. Don't keep everyday AI as your own secret, as your own cheat code. That'd be rude. If this was helpful, please repost this. Please tell someone about it. If you're listening on the podcast, we appreciate it. Please leave us a rating and follow the show. I'd really appreciate that. And then after all that, please go to youreverydayai.com. Go sign up for our free daily newsletter and join some of the leaders in the industry who learn about AI from us. Thank you for tuning in. Hope to see you back tomorrow and every day for more Everyday AI. Thanks, y'all.